It's Sunday night here in New York, early Monday morning,
Well, 9
where
a.m.
9 a.m. It's can be early. And this is the episode number 3 in this little JMI series called Trading Fours. And it's kind of appropriate, perhaps, that this particular one is Trading Fours because I don't know, we seems to apply to, horn players or singers or whatever, trading fours with the drummer or eights or choruses or whatever. So appropriately, I have with me today Dave Sanders. And in all transparency, I have never played with Dave. I did not know him until I had never talked to Dave until about sort of a week ago. And so I've looked at Dave's website, I've listened and been impressed by a lot of things. So I have a bunch of questions here. But maybe before we just quickly get started, I will quickly note Dave's website is daveplaysthedrums.com. And you can easily find Dave Sanders on YouTube as Dave Sanders. And there's some very cool stuff on there for you. But anyway, welcome, Dave. And
Hello.
welcome to this session, and let's have some fun for the next, I don't know, few minutes at least. And we just hope things, just like when you trade fours, that things don't go off the rails, as they sometimes do.
Yeah.
But anyway, Dave, I really don't know a lot about you, so let's start at the beginning. Early background, why the drums? Where were
Uh,
you when you decided to do all that?
I grew up in Sydney, um, I guess it's classed as the inner west, in a little village called Putney, which is on the Parramatta River. And I went to Putney Primary, and my father was an amateur flautist, so we had a flute in the house. So when there was music lessons at school, I chose flute, and studied flute for maybe 3 to 4 years. Um, Before going to high school. In the probably the last, right towards the end of primary school, a neighbour around the corner from me got some drums and started having drum lessons. And the Billy Hyde's van would turn up out the front of his house, and he'd have the drum lessons. I'd sit in the gutter listening to the drum lessons and trying to figure out how what was happening, what was how the sounds were being made, without actually seeing the drums. Um, and so I discovered I could sort of tap away and sort of mimic what I was hearing. And then when I got to high school, which was Malvina High School, they had a great music program. And the drummer there, who was 2 years ahead of me, was a drummer called Gordon Rytmeister, which in Australia pretty much everyone knows who Gordon is. He's a very well-respected drummer of all styles. And so I signed up to have drum lessons there, and soon discovered that my ears had tricked me, and how I thought the drums were being played wasn't exactly what was happening. So I joined band, and I was basically sat next to Gordon for that time in high school. And if he was sick or was away, I got to play the drums, and if he was there, I got to play triangle or tambourine or auxiliary percussion. And I say that I've been following Gordon around since then, because I've the history of it is I seem to go into gigs after him. So I get the benefit of seeing or hearing how he does it, and then I try my best to do a similar job. Yeah.
Seems to be a drummer's story, and the same thing in New York. I talk to a lot of drummers, especially like Broadway drummers who say, I followed such and such around, or, in the great jazz ensembles, I played drums for whatever, and I followed whoever. That seems to be a thing because unless you're the band leader and it's your band as the drummer, I guess, you can tend to, like Art Blakey used to say, I go through the next iteration, and you bring in new people. And that seems to be the tradition for drummers, is quite a lot, I've noticed, is that you follow somebody else into a musical setting of some description.
Yeah. And I mean, I kid you not, it literally is. That is what's happened to me. Like, so I just spent the last 2 days playing in a big band with an artist called Tom Burlinson, who is like a Sinatra style singer. Ralph Pyle is his musical director, and Gordon used to do
Great.
that for a long time.
Cool.
So I'm going in and playing the drums.
Ah,
Um,
please
and,
say
and
hi to
I'm,
Ralph. Please say hi
yeah,
to Ralph from me too. I never really knew Gordon because I had left before he really came onto the scene. But
yeah.
even with me, as I know Gordon's reputation as well. Just
Mm.
backtracking really quickly, you mentioned this is to people who, maybe non-Australian. You mentioned Billy Hyde. It's his name comes up so much in Australian drumming, especially, and I think it's maybe an important name to just the fact that he touched the Billy Hyde clinic sort of even touched you from an early age too. Is this something that's uniquely Australian?
Um, well, I mean, Billy Hyde, as far as I know, was a drummer. I never knew Billy Hyde, but I knew he was a drummer, and I knew that he had these drum shops called Billy Hyde Drum Clinics. I think there was a big one in Leichhardt. But I did know that later on they had a shop in the 90s in Surrey Hills, and they used to put on actual, drum clinics with Australian and international drummers. I went to a master class, I think, with about 10 other people with Dave Weckel once at the Billy Hyde store, and that was fantastic. So I think,
Hmm.
as far as I know, Billy Hyde was a bit of a pioneer in drum education. Um, and
That's what I've heard. So I just wanted to just go back, just catch what you'd said earlier, just for anyone, tuning in, that it's Billy Hyde has come up in several just several people I know over the years. Um,
mm,
just and it's interesting, drum clinics I've been to those myself. Again, all transparency, I happen to play the flute, but I'm a big fan of drummers, and I love great drummers. I love, listening to them. Obviously, love playing with great drummers, and so I'm always interested. And Tom Burlinson, I have heard too. I've
mm,
been, I think I've seen something of his. I do try to tune in sometimes to things Australian as much as I can.
yeah.
But that's cool. It sounds like a great band, especially with Ralph leading it.
Oh, it was a great band. There's a few other staff members from JMI in that band. Andrew Shaw playing the bass and Shannon Marshall playing trumpet, and who else? Josh Hatcher was on baritone. Um, yeah, I mean, I've had the experience of I was playing some festival a few years ago, and Tom was playing there with a big band out of Sydney, and I just sat literally behind Gordon and sort of, went, okay, I'm just going to see how he negotiates these charts because, drum charts are notoriously hairy. There's so many different styles of the way people write a drum chart. So it's such an education to hear someone like Gordon, who is a fantastic big band drummer, negotiate those charts and drive the band. And, like sitting right next to him, I was like, oh, okay, make sure so it's I'm playing and I'm thinking about how Gordon would play it at times. It's
Um,
good.
I'm glad you mentioned, drum parts, because I've tried to write them. I've been successful, non-successful. Sometimes I've just thrown a drummer a lead sheet, which seems to work the best. It's like just, a good drummer, you can just sort of leave them to it, and just maybe just, drop a few little hits or whatever on there. But just I'm going to flip over to something else I was going to ask you a bit later, but reading for a drummer, I think, is an interesting subject because I have played with drummers in the past who've never read, who went, never learned to read and were good drummers. I think the way like Buddy Rich, for instance, the way to get around him was, you gave him a tape and he would learn everything on the tape. But of course, he was sort of contained in the Buddy Rich world. It's not like a session drummer or a drummer who's just got to come into a brand new band or a brand new situation. But I would imagine reading is a good thing for a drummer to learn.
I think it's I think it's essential. I actually don't know how I could do what I do without that skill. Um, and I find it close to impossible to teach someone who doesn't have those skills or is unwilling to learn to read, to the point where I don't want to teach those people. Because I think, if you think about general day-to-day life, if you've got to go to the shops and do your groceries, most people will write a list. It helps them remember. Everyone knows if you're studying, if you actually write down what you're trying to, contain in your brain to retrieve later, if you write it down, you've got more chance of that coming back to you. So for me, like in teaching, I need to, I use reading because it's just the best way for me to communicate with a student. I can set them on a path, in half an hour. I joke that I could bury someone with information and they can go away for a month and practice that, as long as they can read. Um, and for me, like I class myself as a commercial musician. So I don't mean as in play commercials, but I play music to make money. And a lot of what I do is I have to fill in for people or learn repertoire at a very short amount of time. So some people, in the jazz world, maybe there's lead sheets, like you said, or in the big band world, there's a drum chart of some point. In the pop world, it's recordings. It's a playlist that you get sent. And I find it easier to write a chart, a very quick chart in standard drum notation with signs and coders and repeats and everything you would see, and all standard notation. Um, and then I've got that repertoire for when it comes around again. And it helps. I can do it almost on one listen of a song most of the times, unless there's something really tricky. And again, if there's something really tricky, that's the quickest way for me to learn it, is to be able to quickly notate it. I thought I was the only person who did that, until I read an interview with an American drummer called Kenny Aronoff, who's a big freelance rock and roll drummer,
I've
classically trained.
I've seen
That,
some of those YouTube videos of him writing
yeah,
things out. Yes, I
yeah. And,
yep,
and I just thought, okay, that was my validation. It was like, this is how I do it. It works. And I've got this shelf up here with folders and folders and folders of different people that I've worked with. And because I live in regional Australia, um, I'll pick up work when they don't have a budget to fly their regular drummer. So, I might work with someone, and 2 years goes by and I get the call again, and I can pull that folder out and I can refresh and go, oh, that's right. That's what happens. So, you know,
right.
and it's, I've got to say, like, if you're just talking about drummers reading, you're not reading pitch, you're just reading rhythm, so it's kind of,
Um,
yeah.
great advice, everybody. Listen to Dave on this one, only because just from my point of view too, I mostly go out and play jazz these days. Just it's the way my life has gone. I used to be in studios and I was a doubler, so and I played all kinds of music too, all different genres. But even now, when I'm going out to play and sit in and somebody calls a tune or whatever in the quote unquote sort of traditional jazz world, the people who I feel are the most satisfying to play with, and I'm talking perhaps about drummers, are the ones who at least not just know the songs, but they know a lot about the songs that they are playing. And it's most likely they've played arrangements of them in the past or whatever. Um, I just, on this sort of staying on this little line for a minute, do you feel then, I'm going to go into sort of, traditional jazz world for a minute, and learning theory for a drummer, learning the chord changes, learning, the song form. Just a quick example, and I wrote it down because I thought, I was playing Star Rise the other day, and there was an angry drummer who got up and played. First time it's ever happened to me. He just wasn't happy, and the rest of the band, we were all looking at each other, because that doesn't happen very often in the jazz world, especially in New York. Everyone sort of gets along, but it was one of those where he was sort of like not happy to be there for some reason. We played Star Rise, And so at the end, we were trading fours or eights or whatever, and Star Rises got a tag at the end. And of course,
Yeah.
he didn't know the song, obviously. And so, he basically, I don't know, trod all over this. And, then we all sort of looked at each other and walked off the bandstand, never to come back for the rest of that night. But it was just interesting to me that, uh, and recently too, I've been sitting in other places with um, younger and less experienced drummers, and how unsatisfying it can be when they don't know the hits. They don't know maybe a little bit of the history of the song. Like Star Rise has a sort of a standard intro that people play, and it's used as an outro and all that just all of those kind of things. So just circling to theory, um,
Mm.
how important do you feel it is to learn like chord changes and sort of, you don't have to know every key and all that kind of stuff, but just getting a sense of harmonically where stuff goes?
Um, well, I just, from my perspective, I think it's essential. Uh, I think you can spot a drummer who's counting bars from a mile off, as opposed to understanding the melody of a song or the structure of the song. I don't know how you would conceive music without trying to understand all of music. I grew up with a piano in the house. I didn't study piano until I was 18, and I studied piano and to be able to pass my audition for the con. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've obviously then had to, do basic piano and I've done theory. I mean, that's just how I think about music. So, from a practical point of view, two things come to mind. I mean, two things. I remember I played for a while with Jim Kelly, who's a great guitarist in Australia. We had a band that was playing predominantly his original music with Jack Thorncraft on bass and Tony Buchanan on saxophone. And Jim writes tricky music. You can't, it's not like you cruise, it's really tricky. And quite often it would be head solo sort of structure, but the solo form could be a little bit different, elongated or condensed, depending, or with cues. It was really easy to get lost. And a few times when I was lost, I could just look and see, because we just had lead sheets with chord changes. I could see what the changes were, and I knew, okay, when I hear that sound, I know where I am, And in the moment, that was like, wow, that's really useful. Now I'm not lost, Um, the other day or the other week, I was had to do a recording for a bass player called Nicky Perot, and in the arrangement, there was a drum solo over some hits, and it was like the hits weren't just like one; they were like some melodic lines. And so I just grabbed my bass and hit record on my computer and read the bass line. I didn't do it in one take. I had to do a couple of takes because I'm not a bass player, but I can read bass clef. I can play it. I could play the changes on the keyboard. Then I could just loop the section that they were going to want me to play a drum solo over, and it's just a great way to practice. As opposed to if I didn't have those skills, well, I don't know how I would be doing it. You know, much more musical and fun.
Totally agree. And, because I've played with so many drummers over the years, I can spot the ones who've really, done that kind of work pretty quickly. And it's, as I said, from a horn player's point of view, it's very satisfying. Um,
And
I'm gonna.
I've got to say also, it's actually really enjoyable to sit at a piano and fumble through some changes and sing a song, regardless of the style. It's a beautiful, fun thing to do. It's the best home entertainment I can think of. Um, and I have to say also, most of my favorite drummers I've found are all piano players anyway. So,
Like Jack
and
DeJohnette, people like that.
if
Yes,
you're
yeah.
Activision. Yeah, yeah. And the other thing too is like, I guess empowerment. I mean, it's sort of like the questions come up. Why would a singer have to learn theory, or why would a drummer have to learn theory or piano skills? It's like, well, do you want to be at the, do you want to have some control in your life? You know, if I want to play an arrangement of a song or I've got an idea, I want to be able to write it out, conceive it, write it out, and hand it to the band and go, play this. Um, Imagine not having that skill. I don't, you know, I don't want to be like that. Um,
It's always great to hear uh, people like Dave say this kind of stuff because just over in my, in the course of my career, I sometimes feel like I've had to almost force people, to do this kind of stuff. And even in my world too, it's so much more satisfying to have sort of a musical background and um, speaking from a flute player's point of view. I know that, and as I said earlier on, I love drummers and drumming. And I feel that actually a greater part of me is thinking and feeling like a drummer when I get on a bandstand. It's amazing how much the world of rhythm, especially in the music that I play and in the music that I've played over many years, where rhythm and drumming have been important. And of course, I'm not just like you're banging things out on a piano. I'm kind of basically tapping feet and slapping my knees. I've got four limbs going, and I've done it my whole life. I drove my parents crazy. I drove my wife crazy, still do, in just tapping all the time. I think I spend, in every situation on the subway or whatever, I'm just sort of in there tapping feet and hands and stuff like that. So I feel that drums are as much a part of my life as the actual flute is itself.
mm, mm.
And do you happen to ever have any students who are not drummers?
Yeah, yeah, I do. Uh, I had a student who's actually a circus performer, predominantly a juggler, but has developed, his name's Joel Salem, uh, and he's developed these juggling balls, which are actually shakers and they light up. And so he does this whole routine with shakers and he jams with bands and does his whole routine juggling and playing rhythm at the same time. And he came just to have some, to get some more rhythmic ideas. Yeah.
Cool.
And so he took paradiddles and variations on paradiddles while he's juggling with these balls. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
unexpected, Dave, and very how cool is that? That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, we have a circus. We have at the end of my street's a circus school. So, yeah, got a few different people in
How
this
many
town.
people can say
And yeah,
that?
I think I've
How
had,
many people can say I have a circus school down it's very cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think music is music, you know. I don't see the difference between playing whatever instrument you're playing. You're still playing music, you know. If your goal is to play with other people, um, like you're only going to benefit by knowing more. The more you know, the better off you are, you know. So
Um, I've looked at a lot of your history and work, and you've talked about a lot already today, but you play a lot of different genres, and so some people that might seem impressive. Um, And, because I feel like I've done the same thing in my career too as a saxophone player, and doubler sort of took me to all sort of singer-songwriters right through to, the craziest, jazz and pop and R&B and all that. And I love it all. Um, and I think I came from, because I started playing sort of professionally, if you will, in around 1972. And that was just that time I was playing with uh, musicians of my age, but also being in the jazz world, I was playing with older musicians, and they tended to sort of be very narrow-minded with in terms of different genres. You were a jazzer, or you were, whatever. I feel like you and I have been sort of lucky in a way that um, we haven't necessarily started with jazz. Maybe we've come to jazz, to traditional jazz through other different genres. And I would just love to hear just maybe your pathway that maybe it started with jazz. I don't know.
Oh
Um,
no, I didn't start with jazz. I mean, I remember. I mean, across the road from where I grew up, there was a guy, Dan Sims. I can't remember his wife's name. His wife was British. I think they were both British originally, and he listened to a lot of big band swing music, very loudly because he was deaf from being in the war, and he'd have a few whiskeys, and on a summer's night turn his stereo up incredibly loud. And that's when I would have heard swing music. But my exposure to music in general was my father loves classical music, and my mother loved Yorkshire. She was from Yorkshire, so brass band music from Yorkshire and musicals. So we had all The King and I, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, all those sort of musicals on LP. So I would just listen to my parents' record collection. And then I had two older sisters who were like anyone else at that age in the 70s. In Australia, it was Countdown, the rock pop music show. So I just listened to whatever they listened to. And getting into playing the drums, I guess in 1980, there was like the culture of Australian pub rock was very large, original pub rock. So the first song I ever tried to play the drums to uh, was actually by Midnight Oil. It was called Some Kids. And it's not one of their hits. It's off a very early EP. It's in 7/4. I didn't know what 7/4 was. I just was trying to play along, and every second bar I was back to front, and so whatever, all those sort of bands like the Angels and Midnight Oil, Dragon, anything like that I heard on the radio, I just tried playing along too. And then later on in high school, a teacher played, I think it was in year 11, they played Salt Peanuts from the Live at Massey Hall, which is like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. And I think that's the one that Charlie Mingus overdubbed the bass on later on. It's Max Roach on drums. And I just remember hearing it and going, wow, that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard, like, because it was so, uh, everyone playing a lot of notes at once, but also connected, there was this incredible connection between all the music. Um, Everyone else in the class hated it. And I loved it. But then, I just went on my way. And at that time, it was sort of, whatever I could get to play with other people. So a lot of it was just whatever was being played in the pubs I would play. And I didn't really get exposed to jazz then until I decided to try and go to the conservatorium, which is again due to Gordon Rytmeister,
oh dear, I think.
because I locally, and it was Don Burrows and George. Oh,
Oh, hang on, Dave. It could be I'm upstate. This could be my signal here is a
oh,
little weak. Probably going to be
cool.
me. I'm
No.
in the country. So, but you mentioned Don Burrows and George.
Yeah. Yeah. So my father took me to a concert with Don Burrows and George Gola. David Jones was the drummer. This is probably in my last year of high school. And funnily enough, Gordon was there assisting the sound guy. And so I went and spoke to Gordon and was like, wow, you know, how good is David Jones? I've never seen anyone play the drums. And then Gordon sort of led on that you could actually have lessons with David Jones. And so I organised to have lessons with David Jones a little while later. And I was lost, after high school, I'd been working in factories for a couple of years. And David Jones suggested he was teaching at the con. Maybe you should go to the con. And so that's when I decided I would take care of doing theory, music with a piano teacher, all those sort of things, and really started practicing. And luckily enough, auditioned and got in to the con. That's when I started to hear jazz. And so I just went there because that's all I knew you would do if you wanted to pursue playing music you go to the con. I didn't go in there with a really an understanding of what jazz was at all, but very soon learned about that, and I just I just or I've only ever just wanted to play. Like I kind of figured that if I was incurring a, a hex debt in Australia, we call it a hex debt. You take a loan from the government to pay for your education. I figured if you're going to get into debt to study this, I want to work as a musician. So, be it jazz or anything, as long as I'm playing, that's good. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
You did, and I love where you everything so far. I've loved where you take it. It's just it's it's entertaining and it's very informative. I just love where your mind goes. And to that point, um, because you teach a lot, it seems, um,
That's it.
what what as I think a lot of players do, and I can remember years ago going to a play in New York, and it was Helen Mirren and it was F. Murray Abraham, and then afterwards, after the play was done, it was an Ibsen play. My wife and I hung around because there was a group of students there, and F. Murray Abraham came down sort of, to this. They were all his students at like Brooklyn College or something like that. And that was fascinating to listen to this guy who was a, Oscar winning, actor or whatever. Uh, After he'd been on stage, come down and talk to all his students and go over the finer points of Doll's House or whatever it was that we saw. And I thought then just how cool that mentoring down and mentoring up has been, for me over all of these years. And I just wondered what you like most about teaching.
What I like most about teaching, uh, I guess I think that's the same thing as what I like about still continuing staying out late playing music is that honestly it sounds a bit corny, but it feels like it keeps me young because I'm in contact with, I've had some students who are maybe 10 years old and then, students through their 20s. Now, the kids who are in their 20s, they turn me on to music that I wouldn't find otherwise. And I find that's they'll say, "Have you heard this?" And no, I mean, I remember a student turned me on to Snarky Puppy. I was like, "Wow, what, like this exists, and so that's what I like, and I like the process. I like the process of learning. Um, I like the challenge of finding, like like the drums are a particularly tricky instrument in that there's a lot of coordination. Um, and the technical part of it is there's a lot of coordination. The other part of it is you actually have to listen to all of the music that's going on. We were talking about before theory and piano and stuff. It's like you are by default a conductor of the band, like you're the instrument of the drums are, if you play louder, everyone plays louder. If you play softer, they play softer. If you slow down, they slow down. You've got so much power. If you stop, everyone turns around and goes, "What's wrong?" And then trying to turn students onto, hey, listen to this, like, are you, listen to the whole bit of music we're listening to. This is why you're trying to learn to be able to do this thing with your foot or your hand. It's so you can massage this performance the whole way, even if you've at school band and you got a conductor or, even if there's a click track in your recording, it's still the drums, like so I find that that aspect and trying to find out how someone learns something because getting back to the coordination, it's a bitch to learn some tricky coordination and it's really trying to drill down and find what is the physical bug here. Can we take care of it?
On
Um,
your
you know,
for everybody, just talking about coordination and just seeing how Dave teaches, check out Dave on YouTube. Not only has he written books, but he's got some free stuff on YouTube that's like gold. Just it's Dave basically, talking about coordination and why. So just I'm just encouraging everyone who's watching this to go check Dave's tutorials on YouTube. I did, and it was like one of those things I just, I was supposed to be doing something else, and then I was watching your one of your lessons, and I realized that time had just sort of passed, and I was sort of like deep into um, coordination and just sort of different hits and different ways of doing it. And in fact, I had just the very next day I went and played a session with a great drummer, and we played Inner Urge or something. I think he actually ended up live streaming himself on TikTok while he was playing the drums, I guess for his students or whatever. No, I wasn't in the picture, good, but I thought that's cool. He's a very good drummer, but he was just trying to show some of his students what he was doing on Inner Urge, and it was kind of cool. But what I noticed, and then we were talking about it later, he was he transcribes a lot of solos, transcribes all kinds of genres and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of Broadway, does a lot of, not unlike you, does a lot of different genres. Um, but was so interesting that I had just been watching you, then I get talking to him about where what part of the kit he's starting to sort of like change up and change around and do differently. And I could really feel it when I was playing. I could really feel him utilizing different parts of the kit to support what I was doing. It had this sort of rolling effect that just felt so good. And I couldn't help but ask him about it later. And sure enough, it wasn't dissimilar to what I'd just been watching you describing on your YouTube channel on this particular lesson. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
just wanted to give a shout out to you, Dave, for actually putting all of this together and presenting it on YouTube for anyone to watch and listen, and go get the books as well too. A little plug for the
Well,
books, but you know,
I'm supposed to have I'm supposed to have done a whole lot more of those videos. The idea of those videos is just to be a condensed form of every chapter in the book. It's just I keep running out of time, and it's I'm not I don't really enjoy making those videos because speaking to the camera, I don't really enjoy, and then it's like I'm not very good at editing, and and the mixing of the sound. So I'm supposed to do more. Apparently, every time I put a video up, it generates quite a few sales. So I should do more. Um, I do
yes,
joke
why
around
not?
that, the book, I haven't made $1 million out of it, but it seems to buy me a new surfboard every year. So,
That's
yeah.
important. Surfing, that's really important. Just okay, let's take a quick sidetrack for a minute. So, Dave, tell me about yourself away from the drums.
Well, I like being creative. When I say creative, I like making things with my hand. Like amateur carpentry and stuff like that. And I like being outside. I like surfing. I love being in the ocean. That's why I live near Byron Bay in northern New South Wales, because I do really love surfing. I'm not very good surfer, but I love being in the ocean, and I've got a partner who shares that love. So we surf together and we fish together and bike ride together. I'm in the middle of doing up a van as a camper, so that's a lot of timber and plywood and like designing the whole thing, how I can have pull-out shelves for my drums and all that sort of business. I like being creative. I actually kind of look at music as the same sort of thing. I like the puzzle of how do I solve this, not necessarily by following instructions. So, you know, that's a bit typical male, but I like the puzzle. So, like, I walk into a room and I look at how something's put together. I'll look at because I always wanted to be a carpenter. I never didn't. My first thing was I was going to be a carpenter, and that didn't work out. So I chop wood in a different form. I play the drums, But
That reminds me, I was going to mention Jim Peace, and I will in a minute, but Jim told me this story about Ricky May playing in a club, and I think I was there at the club, some club in New South Wales, and we were backstage, and the club owners were like really, happy to have Ricky there, and I think Jamie was his musical director at the time, and they were so proud of their club, and they had a drummer and a bass player, house drummer and a house bass player. And the manager of the club said, and he's a carpenter by day. And Ricky, like this, said, and by night. I thought that was, I do. And Jim told me that when I think I said to Jim, I think I was there with you. We were doing this, it was, I
Yeah,
think maybe Jim was backing, I don't know, another band or whatever. But
yeah, beautiful.
when you said that, it just brought back those memories of Jim as well, too, by the way,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
I know you studied from Jim Peace. And to me,
Right.
Jim is sort of like one of the least well-known sort of treasures around in terms of drumming and technique and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah. Well, Jim, I had a lot of questions about technique when I was probably in my early 20s, maybe 21 or 22, and I had a lesson with Andrew Gander. And I asked Andrew about some technical questions, and he said, "Oh, well, Jim Peace has just got back to town. Just go and have some lessons with Jim Peace, you know." And then someone else said that same name to me. I think three people said it. I go, "Oh, I've got to call this guy Jim Peace, who I'd never heard of." Um, and I went to his house. He lives in Brooklyn, in on the Hawkesbury in Sydney. And and like Jim's had done a lot of study with Joe Morello and other people like Murray Spivak and Freddie Gruber in the States. He'd really gone and tried to find out, about drum technique, the physicality of, how to use your hands and the physics of the sticks, and I think he made his own decisions that for him, Joe Morello was the guy, and he's like one of Joe's star students. And so, and his approach to it was based off Joe and made sense to me. And it's so simple. Like, it's so simple in that, you use your natural motion of your wrist, you throw the stick at the drum and you let it come back, and you try and stay out of the way, It's so simple that I think people overlook it. But um, man, I wouldn't be able to do what I do without it, because I I can literally play all day, um, at the soft as you want and as loud as you want. I mean, when I say loud, I mean like, punk rock loud, and I can just play in it, and I don't get hurt. I don't get blisters. My hands don't hurt. It's really, and the drums sound full. Not There's a difference between on the drums. There's a difference between loud and powerful, or loud and full. Loud is like harsh, and you're choking the vibration of the cymbal or the drum, and it's a harsh staccato sound. Whereas when you do this thing, it's like, because you're not getting in the way of the stick rebounding, that membrane or that cymbal can vibrate and produce all the frequencies that are possible. And so you get this fuller sound. You can always change it. That allows you to manipulate the sound. So you can choke down a little bit and control the decay of a cymbal, or you can change the tone of the drum just by how you use your hands before you um, use any like muffling or anything like that. So you know, I mean, I was very lucky that I learned a lot of great things with David Jones. Um, and then Jim was the person who sort of gave me the really super logical way to approach it from a technical point. Oh, okay.
Sorry, Dave. That's that was
Okay.
Okay. So here we are back with Dave. That was
Sorry, I
me.
don't know if that's my end or not. Oh,
Yes, your internet connection is unstable, it's telling me. So that's fine. Okay. Well, it's been fascinating to, we could just um um so just for since this is, trading for, just wondered since you teach there, um how you feel about the environment there at J. I was really enjoying what I saw there, just the feeling, the encouragement that everyone was given there. It doesn't matter, environment. How long have you been there, Dave? And just what are your thoughts about JMI?
okay. My thoughts are just if we just press pause for a minute, you just choked up quite a bit then, so I think I gather what you're asking about. Um, my involvement at JMI. I'm just going to keep talking because this is recording, so maybe you'll be able to edit it and make sense.
Yes, I will. Yes, sir. I'm tethering on my phone right now because I think that we've lost the internet up here. So
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I've been involved at JMI, well, for at least 10 years. Um, and I generally just teach there 1 day a week and teach the drummers. Uh, I've also been involved in their summer camps that are held in January for probably the same amount of time as well, the last 10 years. What I find different about JMI from other institutions is that because it's a small institution, there's a there's a lack of bureaucracy. That means it doesn't get bogged down. We can move very quickly if there's visiting artists we want to get in to use. Those decisions can get made really easily. So it makes it possible to take advantage of visiting professionals to the area, which I think, for me, being in the nuts and bolts of working in an institution, that's incredible, because I've seen the opposite of that. Um, the other thing I find is, like it's a small staff body, and because it's purely music focused, it's not part of a larger institution. The whole thing is about music. Um, I find it, a really encouraging place. There's a lot of varying abilities there. Um, there's some incredible players. There's some people who maybe are right on the start of their journey, but everyone is encouraged. It's all very positive. It's all very positive without avoiding being constructive. You know, I don't think it's good to say everything's great when someone plays. You need to be, there has to be good constructive criticism, but that can be delivered in a positive manner. Um, I find that really well. As I said, I play with a lot of the staff members as a player, so they're all they're all players first and foremost, which is a really important thing. Like I would never want to be involved. Me personally, I don't want to study with someone who's not a player, who's playing regularly, because I think that's and I also personally, I don't want to just teach if I'm not playing. Like I will do both, even though it's incredibly tiring to do both. But I won't do one or the other. Like I'll always play, but I don't want to be a teacher purely, because I think you lose perspective. It's very easy to sort of maybe get caught up in things that don't really reflect the realities of being outside and playing. The other thing which is also unique, what I've found at JMI, is that, I guess the academic term is that they scaffold, meaning that what's being taught in one class is supported by what's being taught in another class. So, you've got a repertoire of tunes, and that's being taught in maybe a theory class and being referenced in a theory class, as it is in the principal study or instrumental class, as it is in an ensemble, which I've found also in some institutions there's almost no correlation between that, and that can get very confusing for students. Um, so I think it's almost the perfect model of how to teach music. Um, the fact that it's a jazz course, I don't think means you have to be a jazz player. I don't think. I just think like you can learn so much through studying jazz that you could apply it to any style of music. It's not, I mean, that's proven historically. Berry Gordy, when he wanted a great band for his studio for Motown Records, hired the jazz musicians, and most of the super successful pop records that have been made through the history, and there's someone in there has been a jazz player. Gives you facility and understanding of the nuts and bolts of music, and do with it what you will after that, I say.
Cool, Dave. Thanks for that. That's because when I visited there a few years ago, I sort of felt this, I felt a lot of those things, but you encapsulated it all very well. Just all the things that I thought when I left there. I thought it was same thing about the repertoire, how it sort of flowed from one kind of class to the other, the nurturing environment, all of that kind of stuff, and the sort of encouragement that you don't have to go out and be a jazz player for for your career. And, most people are not going to be, either by design or by choice, but that's cool to hear. I'm sorry about the internet connection. That's been me. I will piece some of this together, but I think I caught everything that I think you may feel is important in here, and I'll, try and sort of piece it together. Dave, it's been a real pleasure to chat with you. I'd love to do this again. Maybe we'll do a part two at some point. I love your shirt, by the way. Everybody, just take a look at the
It's
yes.
watch. It says watch the bass pal, and it's credited to Jack Thorncraft,
I
who
was
was
going to say that sounds just like Jack's language. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, if you go on, I think Spotify or something like that, you can actually search up the song called "Watch the Bass Pal" and written by Jack. And I mean, Jack was a great bass player, and yeah, a good friend, a very good
Good.
friend.
Yes, I'm not surprised. I knew Jack pretty well, played a lot with him, had lots
Mm,
of lovely conversations when I played with him in Sydney a lot before he moved up north. But
yeah.
yeah, I can imagine that he was a whole lot more than just a bass player to you and to a lot of people, just from
Yeah,
my
that's right.
experience
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. Thanks
Anyway,
a
he
lot,
wrote this.
Dave.
I got to say, he had this phrase, "Watch the bass pal." He wrote the song, and the song is full of true stories about different situations where people tried to move his bass or touch his bass, which was an instrument made in 1830. It's for sale if anyone wants to buy it. And very incredible bass, double bass. Um, and so he was famous for this saying, I think it was at Channel 7, someone had tried to move the bass and he'd said, "Hey, watch the bass, pal." Um, and so, yeah, we recorded an album, and he, as a joke, not a joke song, but it's very funny. Anyway, watch
I'll
the bass,
definitely look
Jack.
it up. I'm going to look it
Yeah.
up. And I encourage everyone else to do that. Jack was a legend. Uh, Dave, we have to do this again, but it's been fun to get to know you a little and just hear about everything going on in your life. It's great. It's been fun, which is, I guess, why we're doing all of this. We're supposed to be having fun. It's like surfing. You're supposed to be doing it for fun, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we use the word play. We play music. We don't work music. I like the idea of playing music.
Right.
Um,
And
yeah,
sometimes you're at the mercy or the behest of the wave, to sort of to take you where you want to go. And music can be that way sometimes too. It can be
yeah,
just that ability to adapt at that moment to whatever
mm,
is just coming at you, like all of the different genres, people you play for, charts they put in front of you, things they ask of you, and then ask you to turn around and be their conductor, basically.
Mm.
That's surfing and music is kind of, there's a lot of, feels like there's a lot of correlation there.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, Mike Knock used to say that. Mike Knock, the piano player, who was one of the teachers at Con when I was there, he said that he felt like improvising was like surfing in that. I don't know if Mike surfs, but he was saying that, like you're adjusting the whole time, and I try to use that sort of analogy with people because, you know, um, when you're surfing, you don't really look back, and it's all about balance. And as long as like the whole thing is not to have a train wreck, not to fall off. And so adjust and balance and keep looking forward. If you're looking back and, you know, worrying about the mistake you played, going into the bridge or something, well, here comes the bridge again, you've missed it again, sort of thing.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
feels like those sort of things are very, very similar.
And anyone who's maybe newer to jazz feels a little uncomfortable. It's okay. You don't have to stand up on the board. In jazz, you can, it's okay. You can still enjoy yourself and lay on the board or whatever and have a good time and
Yeah.
enjoy the waves, enjoy the everything that surfing has to offer. And same with music, and especially jazz. And I love that idea that you don't look back because you can't really look back. And the same
Mm.
thing with with the next gig. You're only as good as your last gig, or yes, you're only as good as your next gig. Really, usually it turns
Yeah.
out for me. you
Yeah.
yeah, cool.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
I'll leave it there for now, Dave. But it's been a pleasure, and I would love to do this again.
Yeah, yeah, I'm up for it. Well, Mondays I'm here. Mondays, this is what I'm doing. I'm sitting here. So,
Maybe we'll have to, maybe we'll do like a 20-minute sort of, check in with Dave every now and then. Mondays with Dave. That
yeah,
would be
yeah,
cool.
okay.
That would be cool. Because you have a lot to a lot to share with a lot of different kinds of people. So that sounds like fun. If you've got the time,
Yeah,
it's my Sunday night. Actually, I usually go to the Bronx Burger House to sit in, but I will not tonight. So but
okay.
that's this was time well spent, Dave.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll see you soon.